Welcome to Let's Get Real with Viv Vermaak. This is a series of conversations with real people, real influence, and real life. And I talk to people that appeal to me and they've offered me some kind of guidance or inspirations. And even if I could, I wouldn't bring on the Simon Sinek's and the Oprah Winfrey's of the world because I can't relate to them. I think for most people that we don't understand these perfect stories of great transformations, and there's a gap not only in the market, but in my life, to speak to real people who can speak to me at my level. And one of these people is Steve Tsakiris. Just the backstory of how we met, he reached out to me on Facebook, and it was very curious because he said, let's go for coffee at least that, or tea. It might have been still booze at that stage, I can't remember. And I thought it was weird because by feeling people's rhythm and the way they speak and what they show on Facebook, you get a sense of whether you'll get on with them or not. And if he didn't reach out to me, I would have reached out to him. And he positioned himself as a poet and a spiritual master, and that he had studied Buddhism with a great Thich Nhat Hanh in France. And at the time, I just thought, oh, Jesus, must I be subjected to this muesli woo-woo bullshit? And I just said to him, man, I don't care about that shit, Steve, okay? Peace is for sissies. Let's talk about real stuff. But his capacity for that gentleness, and then he laughed, which of course was funny to me as well. But that we could be so different and still find a way to speak to each other. Steve Tsakiris, welcome. Thank you for being some kind of a spiritual guidance to me, even though I don't really believe in it. And thank you for being there for me. We still do a monthly, what I call AA with Steve, Authentic Anonymous, that we just check in on each other and share some thoughts about life and the universe and everything. Welcome, Steve Tsakiris.
Thank you, Viv. Thanks for that great introduction. The one thing I would definitely say is I'm certainly not a spiritual master, hey. For me, spirituality needs to be not fluffy, not airy-fairy, not new agey, and I don't want to offend anybody, but it needs to be something real, something that you can apply in your life. So, yes, you're right. I've studied all sorts of things, and I've tried to apply them in the grime of the city. Hey, I need to try and make it real. But thank you for being in contact, and our monthly meetings are really a good inspiration for me too.
Cool. So let's just go quickly. So you've corrected me already. You're not a spiritual master, but you have a lot of experience. So let us just walk us quickly through the timeline of your life, which is quite interesting and unusual. And then afterwards, I'll ask some questions. So pick up your story. You started somewhere, and then there was listen, this is the wrong path, and you went a completely different path.
Yeah, I think, look, my story started as a kid. I was very sensitive I could kind of sense things. I think all children do, to be honest with you. I could sense things. I remember standing under the stars and connecting and like really feeling like there's a oneness here. This wasn't knowledge. I was 5 or 6 years old. This was like a real feeling of connectedness with everything. And then, of course, I went to school. I went to high school, I went to university, and you get educated in these institutions. And it's through the dust of daily living, what I call the dust of daily living, that actually you forget who you are. You forget your connection, and then society tells you who and what you are. So for me, a quick timeline was, I was very good at school. I used to get rewarded for my intellect. So that's who I thought I was, this intellectual person. Went to high school, was good at school. So obviously varsity's next. So I went to Wits University. Also, one of the other things when I was a youngster is I was very passionate about tennis. Tennis was my life, and I wanted to become a professional tennis player, which in itself is a very difficult thing to do. So in any case, I landed up going to Wits University, and at Wits University I studied aeronautical engineering, but to be honest with you, I also discovered certain interesting things at that time in my life, and I discovered nightclubs, I discovered attractive women, I discovered booze. And so my Wits years were more party and fun than studying, to be quite honest. And we can come around back to that in a bit if you like. After Wits, I left Wits and I got involved in business. And that's where my life changed, because business, a specific business thing that I was doing, brought me to my knees. It didn't bring me to my knees financially, but it brought me to my knees emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I thought, no, shit, man, there must be more to life than this. This can't be what it's all about. So what I did then is I literally packed my car and I went to the coast. I said to my girlfriend at the time, I need to be on my own. I packed my car and I went to Umhlanga Rocks, and I stayed at the old Umhlanga Rocks Hotel. And that's when my path started to turn, because what I wanted to answer was a simple question. What did that little guy know that I have forgotten? Because there must be more to life than this shit. That's for sure. And that's where my path kind of started. I met a guy called John Kehoe, who's a famous mind power Canadian guy. I did his course. That had an impact on me. John and I became friends over the years. I then started to teach with him, actually, strangely enough. We started to teach stuff together. We used to teach this spiritual course out in nature called The Awakening, where we used to take people through a process. So that's where things changed for me, because my life started to make sense once again. After that, I went to the United States in 2005, and I worked with sound healing and sound therapy, which is one of the core things of my work. Remember, in my early days, I was a DJ, a nightclub DJ, and so sound and music had always followed me around. But now I realized that you can use sound for different reasons. And so I went to the United States and I worked with that there, brought it back to South Africa. In 2012, I got invited by one of the participants of the Awakening to go and join the Blackfoot tribe in Canada, which is a Native American tribe. And I was invited to this really way out, far out thing, but the real deal, it wasn't a touristy, trinkety thing. It was a real thing called a sun dance, which was an insane experience for me, to put it mildly as well, but very profound. And then to get back to the Buddhist monastery thing, in 2014, I decided to take a sabbatical from my life because I needed to figure things out again. And I went to Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in the south of France. And that was a profound, life-changing experience for me. So I've had all of these different, that's in a nutshell, I've had all of these different experiences in my life that have added to, but the one thing that I've always sought to do was to make spirituality not fluffy, not airy-fairy, but real. You've got to be able to apply it in your life. And I do say I'm not a Buddhist, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not any of these things, and I'm all of these things. I've studied all of these traditions, and I've taken from the mystical side of those traditions, and I've just put it into my life and kind of created my own framework from which I work. So that's kind of the summary of my years there.
Fantastic. So obviously people are going to be interested in the apparent contradiction between the time spent in brothels and Buddhist temples, but I won't be surprised if there's overlap. So tell us the story about a brothel that sticks with you and a story about the Buddhist temple that sticks to you, and then give us some, from a spiritual, philosophical perspective, where these two professions are similar.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Well, first of all, going back to my early 20s, it all started up in nightclubs, right here in Johannesburg. I was a nightclub DJ, and I literally spent every day, except for maybe Sunday, in a nightclub. I mean, I still remember, for people that are joining us from Johannesburg, they might even remember some of these nightclubs, the Goblet, Masquerade, Bella Napoli, Caesar's Palace, Q's. I was there every night. And so I found, first of all, what attracted me was the music. I loved music. The attractive women were also an attraction for me, I must admit, and being a DJ made it easy for me to kind of make acquaintance.
Yeah, we love the DJs. No, we just loved you guys. I don't know why. You could be as cuck or as ugly, but there was an appeal about that authority and the music or something.
It must be something like that, and the long hair and all that stuff. It all played into my hands, so it was wonderful. So I guess it started there, and I realized that I was meeting like real people. That's the thing, hey, is like you meet real people in these places, and I'll touch on the similarities between like spending time in monasteries.
No, I know that you have one interesting story about the brothel in Greece, right?
Yeah. So okay, so
tell us that story. Come on.
Let me tell you the story. I was 20 years old and I was in Greece on my own. I was single at the time, and I was in Greece, and I decided to go out on a jaw. So in those days, there was this massive club in Greece in a place called Glyfada. I think the club was called Mercedes, and that was like the club. You know, it was bigger than the clubs that we had in South Africa, and I wanted to go in to this club. So I was outside trying to get in. The thing with the clubs in Greece at that time is they would not let single guys in. So they would let couples in, and they would let single ladies in, but they wouldn't let single guys in for whatever reason. I think that was their formula, for whatever reason. And right outside the club, I met this other guy called Chris. I still remember his name. And Chris was doing his military service. He was a Swedish Greek in Greece doing his military service in Greece. And so we were both trying to get in. They wouldn't let us in. So Chris says, you know what? Let's just go to some bars. Stuff this place. Let's just go to some bars. So we got into a taxi and we went to this area where it was just full of bars, and we kind of went from bar to bar, listening to music, drinking. And then at some stage, he got this very sentimental look in his eyes. And he said to me, Taki, because my Greek name is Taki. So he said, Taki, this morning, and of course it wasn't a surprise to me, what does a guy who's in the army, who's got leave for a weekend, where does he go? Where would he go? He went to a brothel, right? So in the morning he had been to this brothel, and he had said to me, I've met this unbelievably beautiful woman and I'm in love, and I said, okay, Chris, that's fantastic. Chris fell in love with one of the ladies at one of the brothels, and he said, I want to show you this woman. And I said, Chris, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. What time were you there? And he said it was like 11 in the morning. This is 3 o'clock the next morning. I'm like, I doubt this lady's still going to be on duty. You know what I mean? That's a very long day to be on duty. But nonetheless, he convinced me. So we got into a taxi and we went into this area, which is called Omonia in Greece, which now I believe is quite seedy, but back in the day was still very respectable. And it was an area where you literally would walk through the houses, and it was normal houses. But in some of the houses, there was a red light outside the house, right? Which meant it was a different type of place. So anyway, Chris couldn't find this place. Eventually, we walked around. We found this place with the red light. It was 3 o'clock in the morning now. And as we were walking, the interesting thing that happened is this woman walked out, and it was an old woman. It was the madam of this brothel. And when you're 20 years old, even 50 looks old. So she might have been 50, but actually I think she was a lot older. She was like in her 70s or 80s. And she kind of came out and said, hello, boys, come on in. She was so friendly and so jovial. And come on into our place. We have lovely ladies and so on and so forth. So Chris and I are like, okay, why not? And the interesting thing that happened there is inside, waiting in the waiting area of this place, was the sailor. And he was a genuine, real sailor with the anchor tattoo. It was the days before tattoos were popular or the thing. This was the real deal. This was like a big anchor tattoo. And what I noticed is this sailor and this old woman were actually engaging in a philosophical conversation that was really deep, which landed up being an argument actually at the end of the day. They were arguing about who had traveled to the most places in the world and talking about all sorts of things about. So the old lady went inside to this, and she brought her passport out, and she started kind of comparing stamps in her passport with this sailor to show that she had been to more places than the sailor had been. So actually what started off to be a brothel run, should we call it, turned out to be a deeply philosophical conversation between this old woman and this sailor, and Chris and myself being in the space. And it was just such a contrasting and interesting perspective to see how actually real people are having real deep conversations in all sorts of places. It doesn't have to be a brothel. It doesn't have to be a spiritual place. People have the same kind of experiences. People have the same kind of challenges in their lives. Everybody has the same types of challenges. And so for me, that was one of many stories. And I'm not going to go into any detail other than that, but it was so fascinating to see how this old lady, and literally, I really think she was in her 70s or 80s, who was running this brothel, having this deeply philosophical conversation with this sailor. And there Chris and I were at 3 o'clock in the morning listening in on their conversation.
So did Chris get that girl? Did he find his girl and marry her?
He didn't, I don't think. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, to be honest with you. But I think at least he had a happy weekend. And then he went back to the army. I never saw him again. But I think he definitely had a very good, happy weekend away from the army.
Sure, many happy endings there. So now looking at the relationship you make between people across all walks of life, having real conversations, and now also spending time with very esteemed Buddhist leaders in Buddhist temples across the world, between the prostitute and the spiritual leader, are there any overlaps? How are they the same?
I think humans are the same. We all have the same struggles. All of us. Doesn't matter who you are. We struggle with self-doubt at some point. We struggle with a feeling of not good enough. We struggle with guilt. We struggle with fear. We struggle with anger. Everybody has the same emotions. We can also generate peace. We can generate happiness. We can generate joy. It's actually a practice. This is what I learned in my life, and this is what I try to put into my work, is that actually, in our consciousness, we have everything. We have the seeds of everything. In the Buddhist model, they would call it store consciousness, or your subconscious mind. Inside there, we have the seeds of joy, of happiness, of peace, of discrimination, of hatred, of love, of fear. Everything is in there. It depends what you focus on. It depends what you water. The things that you nourish, the things that you water will grow. And the things that you don't will die. And that's really the philosophy of Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh, by the way, who passed away in 2022, he taught a very different type of Buddhism. He called it engaged Buddhism, because it was about being able to be engaged in your life. It's not about sitting in a monastery and meditating and everything's fine. If you can't bring your practice out into the daily world where the grime and the difficulty is happening, then what's the point of
Amen. Amen.
What's the point? So
yes.
there's similarities because we're all people, Viv. That's the thing. And you see people in certain situations and they're real because life has either ground them down, for example, in the seedier world. And by the way, I don't think, and especially not in those days, and I must say that it's been 30 years since I've been into a brothel. So let me just put that out there. But in those days,
terms and conditions, disclaimers.
That's right. So in those days, I don't know, my experiences were not seedy. They were real life experiences of people actually sharing authenticness about their lives. Everybody has struggles and everybody has different ways of getting through their struggles.
So definitely the concept of authentic sharing, whether it's in a highly physical, sensual or sexual sense or a spiritual one, I think as commonalities in both. And that the person who visits either the brothel or the Buddhist temple are going there to look for something outside of their own life just for a brief moment to find a different perspective. Because sometimes that in itself is healing. So definitely the two, both occupations or both positions in the world have healing properties. And they're both exercises in detachment and the relief of suffering in a way. But to the one, we attach a purity that we don't attach to the other, but they are similar, definitely.
Well, absolutely, especially if your quest is real, because you can have a false quest in a monastery and a real quest in a bar or a brothel if you're real with yourself. There's a lot of people that might go into a monastery and feel holier than thou or feel above others and that kind of thing, and that's not real. You need to be able to interact with yourself. You need to meet yourself, and that means to meet your strengths and your weaknesses.
Yes.
It's interesting, and I'm certainly not going to put myself in the same class as these people that I mentioned, but there are stories of Hemingway, and there are stories of the famous physicist Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman apparently had some of his most profound ideas about physics where? In strip joints. He used to go there and just chill and relax, and things used to come to him. So there is a certain area of the creative spirit that can come up in all sorts of environments in our lives, whether they are in so-called spiritual places or in so-called seedier places. It depends how authentic we are with ourselves and what we're looking for.
Yes. And you know what? It's weird hearing you talk like that now. Now I feel guilty that I swore in my opening intro of you. That shows you that all of us, we are aware of people who are spiritually ahead of us, and then we do have this difference, and then we do have that feeling of sacredness, or that you're in the company of somebody that's just a few steps ahead of you and that you can learn. And that's a very powerful feeling. And I've always felt that about you. So thank you for making me feel a little bit guilty that I swore. But this concept of engaged Buddhism is very powerful to me, because I think this, and the quest of the authentic quest when you go into a Buddhist temple, because what is the point of these things if they don't help us in real life? And I ripped the poor Dalai Lama off, who I've never met, and I'm sure he's a lovely old man, but I always say he is not relevant in my life. If the Dalai Lama can go through the Galulis interchange during peak hour traffic 8 times in a row without swearing, then he has a useful lesson to me in my life. But otherwise, there is nothing in his universe, in his background, that's relatable to me. And the weird concept how people have this attached to these spiritual guides when it relates absolutely nothing in the rest of your life. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. It needs to be real. And my experience with Thich Nhat Hanh was that he was a genuine master, okay? And I've never met the Dalai Lama, but I assume that he's got his own practices, and Thich Nhat Hanh was a master. He really was. Just going back to one point that you made about the swearing, I remember the very first time we met for that coffee, at Eastgate Shopping Centre. You said to me, you said, because as we know, as you know, I swear a lot too. So you certainly don't need to apologize for swearing. And I remember you saying to me at that first coffee or tea that we had, you said, I like you. You said, I like you, Steve, because you swear a lot. And actually, we landed up doing something which you used to do at the time, and I recorded a session for you. Remember, you used to do something called Fuck Off Fridays.
Yes.
And so that's what we actually recorded. So no need to apologize about that. I don't think it matters. You know, I think authenticity comes with who are you as a human being? I believe that we're all here to have an experience. You know, right and wrong are actually moral constructs, and moral constructs are made by people, not by the universe. I don't think the universe sees right and wrong, and I'm certainly not suggesting that you go out and commit murder out there. No, but I'm saying that we are here as souls having an experience, a physical experience. You might call it soul, you might call it whatever you want. You might call it the quantum field, having a physical experience. For me, it's the universe experiencing itself. And the more we allow ourselves to experience, the more we do our lives justice. So it doesn't really matter. We're here to have an experience. Not everybody's meant to be a priest. Not everybody's meant to be a prostitute. Not everyone's meant to be a businessman. Not everyone's meant to be a sportsman or a sportswoman. We're here to experience our lives. As long as it's an authentic experience, we cannot pretend that we're not angry. We cannot pretend that we don't feel guilty.
Sure.
Because what actually happens when you try and suppress that kind of stuff, it comes up even stronger. That's what happens. So we need to acknowledge it.
So this is where it overlaps with my concept of dismotivational speaking, or whatever my iconoclastic position is. So I tell people that they have to invest in a cup of cafe. So the C stands, is it now the C? Oh, curiosity, CAFE, curiosity, authenticity, and the E for realistic expectations, and the F for a fuck you list. And that's the whole point, that you must allow yourself to be human. And where I have problematic positions with the peace and Zen and Buddhist crowd, because they seem to make you feel guilty about being angry. And what I like about you, even though you disengaged Buddhism, that you get angry. And sometimes in our session says, last week I was really, really angry. And I thought that's fascinating, but that you allow yourself to be angry, and that we even thought maybe we must write a little booklet or a pamphlet on how to be angry, and tell your friends and family, listen, when I throw the angle like that, don't take it too personally, which is a difficult message. But how do we show people, if we're saying the theory is that you must allow yourself anger, how does that look like in a family or social setting? Do you ask permission first to have an extreme anger outbreak? Because by disallowing those feelings, we are suppressing ourselves. But by expressing the feeling, you also risk pushback. So I'm guessing Thich Nhat Hanh had a way, or I don't know, is there a way to deal with it? Or you just shoot first, ask questions later? Blow off steam first and ask permission later?
Yeah, look, I think there's 2 points to that. One, I'll share with you what Thich Nhat Hanh taught me in terms of that. But let me start with myself first. Of course I get angry. Listen, I'm Greek. I'm a passionate kind of red-blooded Greek guy, and I've got a temper. That's the way I am. I don't do it. It's not so much how you feel, because you can't help how you feel. You've got to express. It's how you actually express it. That's important. Like, you don't want to go around beating people up. That's not a good idea. You know, if that's your form of expression, it's probably not a good idea. Well, you know, that also stands to depends on your perspective. But for myself, people that know me know that I'm going to let things out. There's lots of people that keep things in. For me, I find that very destructive. It's almost like keeping a hand grenade in yourself.
Sure.
And the shrapnel causes you to be mentally and physically ill. It would for me. So I have to let it out. I have this way of letting it out. And then once I let it out, I completely forget about it. It's gone. So if I'm pissed off at you, Viv, I'm going to have to somehow find a way to tell you that I'm pissed off with you. Otherwise, it's like shrapnel inside of me. Once I've done it, then we can go back to the friendship. I've forgotten about it. It's done. Do you know what I'm saying? So for me, that's what I do. I let things out. And it does scare some people. It does, because it depends on how they receive it. Some people will, but people that know me, people that are close to me, know that that's the crazy in me that's going to come out, and I have to let it out. And then afterwards, I'm back to my normal self. I'm back to my loving self.
Now that sounds healthy to me, because we have these morning meditations and find your center. Maybe there's a gap for me to create spaces where people can come together and just be their worst selves. But be your worst self in a safe space. And in your morning meditation, morning arsehole time, and that you're allowed to, and your family give you 5 minutes in the morning to be an arsehole or something. But there's definitely something in the recipe that's missing with all this peace and love and don't get angry stuff. Okay, now Steve has disappeared. Hopefully he rejoins. I hope his battery has not gone flat. Steve, my baby, please come back. Okay, there you are. Okay, you just froze for a while, and now I can't hear you. Okay, there you are. Okay, so the way I see you is if that you are the Dalai Lama, but if the Dalai Lama went to prison, he's all peaceful, right? Except he will take a toothbrush, make a shank with it, and stab you to death if needed, and then say, "Namaste, motherfucker. Go good, my brother." So I love the fact that you bring complexity to a very simplistic image we have of the great masters who that's always in peace and love. So you do sound journeys as well. Talk to me about that, because sound is a very, I don't know, it's not a tangible thing for most people. I don't know. I think we're visual, so we understand art and we understand paintings and we can understand intellectual, but sound is such a weird abstract thing that we don't understand, and you access people's subconscious with the sound journeys. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's a very powerful thing. If I may, just before I get back into that, I just want to backstep one thing and just come back to what I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh, because you mentioned this thing about meditation and morning thing. You see, that is a practice. We can't be in a state of meditation all the time. We can't be in a state of peace all the time. But what that helps you to do is to generate inner peace. The thing that I learned from my time at Plum Village, which was Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery, is that peace is not what I thought it was. Peace is not about silence. You can be peaceful in amongst the most chaotic, noisy place, and you can be angry in the most peaceful place. So it's not about silence. Peace is also not about, it's not even about values. What I found out is that peace is actually an energy that we generate, we create. Almost like a radiator creates heat. We can create peace. And that comes through practice. So, I don't know if, you're still there, Viv. You just froze for a moment. So it's about having daily practices which actually helps you to generate this inner peace, so that when explosive situations come, you don't kill someone. You don't grab them by the throat. You don't butcher them. It's like, because you've got a semblance of peace within you. What it helped me develop, what Plum Village helped me develop, was an inner store of peace. That when I came out into the world, yes, I still get pissed off. Yes, I still get angry. Yes, I still snap. Yes, I still react. But I can catch myself, and I can almost make it a safe thing for me to do, to process my emotions, and also not to make it damaging for anybody else. So that's what I learned. It's about practice. Peace is a practice. Very, very important. As far as the sound journeys go, I mean, my background was always music. Music always attracted me. As I said earlier, I was a DJ. But then I realized later in my life, and especially when I worked in the United States, was that you can use sound to access the deep subconscious of people. And that's exactly what you said. Because sound and music, it goes beyond thinking, it goes beyond rational thought, it goes beyond logic even. It goes straight into those areas within ourselves that are in our subconscious mind, and somehow you can access people's subconscious and help them on their journey. What I've found is sound is actually very mysterious and magical. The sound journeys that I do, I've been doing them for 23 years, and I still don't understand the mystery of it. I just know there is a mystery. I'm a tool. I'm one of the instruments that goes into that sound journey. I use my instruments, I use music, I use sound, and I use my intention to help people, to create an environment, to help people connect with themselves. I just did a sound journey in December, and I've had some phenomenal feedback, as I always get from people, but it always surprises me. They'll tell me, that had a profound impact on my life. That helped me to access, because I always warn people after sound journeys, stuff comes up, and that stuff might not be pleasant. It might be anger, it might be fear, it might be guilt, but it comes up. And recently I had a lady who was on a sound journey with me in December. I saw her the other day, and she said, "You know what? A few days after that sound journey, I had 3 major eruptions of anger. And I never get angry. And she said to me, the fact that I was able to access that anger has freed me up because it showed me why I was angry. And it pointed to the fact that the anger was rooted in fear. And I was stuck in my life because of that fear. And that allowed me to release the fear and the anger. So we could have an hour conversation just about sound, but basically it's really magic and mysterious in the way that it can access memories, it can access emotions, and it also works with the neurochemistry and the neurobiology of our brain. So there's lots of different levels where sound actually works.
And what's lovely about sound is, look, it sounds scary to me that you can access those things because I'm an intellectual and a verbal person, but that it's able to access that without you forcing to talk about stuff. But it's so archetypal and deep, you don't have to have it in words because the sound does it for you, which I think is quite remarkable and powerful. And the concept of anger as it relates to the subconscious, and that anger makes us ill. A lot of these autoimmune diseases, and I think it's true for me, whenever I have inflammatory conditions like sciatica, all the other things, it's somehow related to anger that I don't know what to do with. So I'm very excited about the concept of anger management, but in a situation where you're allowed to share it. And just it's silly to say, let's get together and be our worst selves, because that's just childish. But I think it's funny, and there might be something to it, and that we teach ourselves to be tolerant of others' anger. But then, of course, you get psychopaths and the narcissists who will abuse the privilege and say, yes, but they said I'm allowed to be angry. So I think it's tricky, but we're disallowing ourselves a lot of humanness in our search for peace, I think.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something very important because remember, I think in my intro I mentioned that when I was very young, I was rewarded for my intellect because I was very good at school.
Yeah.
So intellect is a double-edged sword because it's very powerful and very important, but it also traps us. It creates this box because as I think Einstein once said, you cannot solve the problem at the same level as it was created. And so logic becomes a bit of a trap. And the reason why sound, for example, is so powerful is because it cuts through the logic, as you rightly said. It goes beyond the logic and really helps people access the stuff that is deeper within them. Because you're also right, you spoke about the inflammatory conditions. Our emotions are chemistry. It's biochemistry in our body that comes out as a result of our thoughts, of our neuroplasticity in the brain, of our emotions. And those chemicals can make us ill, or they can make us better, they can heal us. So it depends how we use them. And so that's why it's important not to suppress things.
So the value I get from our chats is because I know you have the spiritual journey and that you're honest about your humanity, which helps me a lot. Because for much of the self-help literature and the motivational speakers and health coaches with pitches perfect solution, I don't feel that pressure with you, even though I do feel the pressure to improve. And we've had journeys on because we feel we have something special to offer the world, but we're not making money of it. And you have had a patchy history with Facebook because you just don't like it. It doesn't bring you peace. And at the same time, I realize I have to use it. And I've kept on saying to you, I know I must do these things. I know I must do LinkedIn, but I can't bring myself to post these things. And you said to me, Vivian, post the fucking things. And I said, yes, master. So that was my motto for the week. Steve said, post the fucking things that you have to do. And maybe there is, I don't know, active Buddhism or engaged Buddhism or whatever we call it, that there is a way to make peaceful practices more real and accessible. I haven't posted most of the things, by the way. I still have that block, but it gave me a sense of comfort that even you can say, no, this is bullshit now. This is not, no, don't just think you're enough. For fuck's sake, Vivian, post the fucking things. So thank you. Thanks for swearing.
Oh, you're welcome. I swear far too much actually, but that's okay. It's a form of expression. Feels good sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, well, listen, I think we've had a good session. What I got from it is I didn't understood the length or the depth of your understanding of the intellectual, spiritual, and philosophical condition. And I didn't understand the engaged Buddhism you spoke about. And I think that might be a way forward for most people, that it takes it out of the shua. And you're 100% correct that it's become a form of status symbol now. That I went to this place, and I became a high priestess of the crystals in South America, but there's no real quest, there's no insight, and people start comparing and competing about how enlightened they are, which I don't think, it doesn't feel like real quest. It becomes like a superiority complex, a superiority fight. And for instance, the same spiritually as body. Now my BMI is this. Oh no, that's nothing. Your BMI is a stupid measurement. I measured my body fat percentage with an MRI. It is only 3 letters, but it does a fancy machine. And then the next, no, that's nothing. I use a DEXA scan. I measured my visceral fat. Not only is the DEXA scan more fancy and expensive, it has 4 letters, not 3. So these health conditions, spiritual and physical, has become a competition instead of a quest for something authentic in many cases.
No, exactly. And that's the thing. And I think it's because actually, the way I see things is we live in different dimensions. There's a dimension of us that is beyond the physical. I believe that whatever you might want to call it, you might want to call it just pure energy. You might call it the soul, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. But there is that dimension. It's what Thich Nhat Hanh would call the ultimate dimension. Then there's also the historical dimension. The historical dimension is this. It's 3D. It's space and time. It's shit with your in-laws. It's arguments with your friends. It's breakups. It's all that kind of stuff. So, we have to make those things merge. I like the saying, we are in this world, but not of it. So we need to remember who we are. My quest was always, as I said, when I broke down in that business, my quest was, what did that little guy remember? Because he knew something that made him peaceful. He made him feel at peace. You know what, Viv? It's possible to be in a noisy, rowdy environment, as I said, and feel peaceful. It's also possible to be angry and feel peaceful. Those are not contradictions, because peace is an energy.
So now you've lost me. Now it's into the woo-woo stuff, and it's not your fault. I'm just not advanced enough. But it's interesting because John Keogh and those guys, they are in these. So now it's that area, and I realize now, I don't understand it because I haven't lived it. But they're into that mind over matter thing, and that you can control yourself. And I think it's more complicated than the stoicism. It's mind over matter. You can control. So I'll talk about that. My gut feel is it's more complicated than mind over matter.
100%. You've hit the nail on the head. I have a saying that it's matter over mind over matter. And it's something that I've developed in the last couple of years, because sometimes, look, this mind over matter thing is great. You can develop a positive mindset, a positive psychology. It's a powerful way of doing it. I'm not saying that that's not the case. But there are certain instances where mind over matter will not work. There are certain chemical imbalances within our body that happen. These are real, and modern science has shown us that now, right? So it doesn't matter how much positive thinking you do. It doesn't matter how much of a positive mindset, you will not get out of it. So for me, I say matter over mind over matter. Let me explain what I mean by this. Is sometimes we have to change, because we are biochemical. We've got a neurobiology, we've got a neurochemistry. We need to sometimes change our biochemistry before we can have the capacity to have our mind work over matter, if you know what I'm saying. Yes. And you can do this by breathing. You can do this through breath work. You can do it through cold. I do cold plunges and breathing. That changes the neurochemistry of my blood and my body. It changes the amount of serotonin and dopamine that I've got in my system. It secretes endocannabinoids and opiates. This is stuff that with modern science we can measure, right? So the matter over mind over matter is I start every morning with a cold plunge and with breathing. Why do I do that? Because it resets me. It resets my matter, my neurobiology. Because I'll tell you, the most difficult part of the day for me is in the morning. When I wake up, all my anxieties, all my fears, all the stuff, all the shit is there when I wake up. And it's very difficult to get through it with just a positive mindset, because it's there, right? So I want to give this message to people who feel like, oh, but they can't, and they can't use their mind, and they're not good enough to use it, or these so-called gurus that are saying like that's the way. Sometimes it's not mind over matter. My dear friends, sometimes it's matter over mind over matter. So for example, exercise will work. Exercise will help. You don't have to do cold plunges. You don't have to do breath work. You can do exercise. It'll change your biochemistry. It gives you a semblance of control. Then you can use your mind over matter.
Fantastic.
So that's matter over mind. And by the way, why do things like alcohol, drugs, and sex, why are they so addictive? Because they change your matter, they change your biochemistry, they make you feel good. So we can find better, healthier hacks than being addicted to alcohol or drugs or sex or work or whatever. You can find better biohacks, but change your matter first, then use your mind over matter. I'm not saying don't use these techniques, but sometimes you've got to change the matter. So that's an excellent point that you make there.
Sure. And I mean, does it matter if you don't mind? And if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. So these things are very complicated, but I love the message that this concept that it's only by the force of your will that you will succeed. And it's much more complicated than that. There's genetics, environment, biochemistry, and just maybe it's not as simple as just believing in yourself. Maybe you have to explore some more options, that it's a complicated system of trade-offs, and bring in spirituality. But I love angry Buddhism and furious peace as paradoxical concepts, and that we explore that maybe a bit more in treatment. And certainly I explore it. I've done my first cold plunge or swimming in the sea, but I shook like this for 20 minutes afterwards. But it was an amazing transformative experience. And I even said on Facebook, God forbid, I think I feel happy. Look, it doesn't last. But that's exactly what you said. And then you start understanding, hang on, the way I feel isn't necessarily a mind state, it's a physical state. And then you have this, okay, let's explore these things a bit more deeply. And then you start understanding how the mind and the matter and the body and all of that works. But this has been an exceptional conversation. I always look forward to our monthly meetings. So definitely I must post some more fucking things. But I have posted more things since you've told me that. Not many, but I have started doing it. And these concepts of the engaged Buddhism, I think, are very powerful. And the breathing, and that you reset your biochemistry, and then you reset your emotions. If you did a sound, yes, you do. If you did a sound journey where we focus on anger, but that's not what you do. You don't focus on verbalizations.
No, you see, the thing is, my job is to facilitate the environment. And then because I do sound journeys with 30 or 40, 30 people at a time, you see, everybody's got different issues. I don't have to know their issues. All I need to know.
That's why it's so powerful that you don't have to share your issues, but you feel them on such a level. And in some place, and that's where religion and spirituality works, that it's a place so deep and archetypal and primordial that it mustn't have words. And I think that's why in the Bible and many scriptures, you're not allowed to give your God a shape. You're not allowed to say its name, because it will spoil the effect of the sacredness.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's beyond verbal. It's not understandable. The problem that people have, and I'm just going to also maybe say something a little bit controversial, but the thing that I have with religion is that a lot of religion is intellectual. People keep it in the brain, in the mind. They know stuff. They can quote stuff. It's not about what you know. It's about what you do with what you know. You can know a shitload of stuff, but then you can be a complete arsehole, and you can rip other people apart and be a complete nuisance to society. That's not spirituality. You can know absolutely nothing. There's people in the Amazonian desert, in the Amazonian forest, I beg your pardon. They've never even seen modern technology, but they can be very connected with nature. They're spiritual. You see, it's beyond words, it's beyond logic, and we get stuck in the brain. Often we get stuck in the intellect.
Fantastic. Steve, this has been a great discussion. Sorry about the technical problems with Facebook Live. I'm now going to put it on YouTube, and that was Steve Tsakiris, and certainly a person who I look forward to speaking every month in our simple and honest WhatsApp conversations. Thank you very much.
Viv, it's a pleasure to have you in my life. You keep going and post the fucking stuff.
Ja, meneer, ja.